We have about 80 purebred Angus cows. This is a different facility type. It's called a slatted floor barn. We've split it up between high moisture corn and corn silage. We feed a lot of high moisture shelled corn, completely covered, so that we're controlling all the manure. Fair amount of hay in the diet, high forage diet. But then they'll be on pasture from May through October, November. We feed a lot of high moisture shelled corn, so a fermented product.
Welcome everybody. Today we are in the Michigan State University beef cattle farm with them, and he showed to us everything, and I hope that you enjoyed this video.
This barn was built in the middle of MSU campus in about 1930, and in 1955 there wasn't enough room for expansion on campus, and so they tore the barn down, put it on wagons, brought it out here, and reassembled it. So we've been using this, it's been used on campus since about 1930. We've adapted it for our use. Because it was built in 1930, it wasn't designed with ventilation that we would like to see today and that kind of thing. So we really only use this barn for calving in the springtime, late winter, early spring when we have the cows calve. And so we bring them into these pens just for a day. Sometimes they're in here for, maybe 48 or 72 hours, just to make sure that the calf is nursing, and everything seems to be okay with the cow and the calf, and then we put them right back outside again. So we don't want to have them in this building that's not ventilated well for very long. So we use this barn really heavily about 2 or 3 weeks a year, and that's about it. But it's got individual pens for being able to put cows and calves in shortly.
Do you know the numbers? How many cows?
So right now we have about 80 purebred Angus cows here at the farm. We are in the process, there's a very long story that goes with it, but we are in the process of expanding that because we have about 330 acres total of pasture land, hay land. Some of that gets shared with other units a little bit, but we could probably have 120 to 140 cows on that land base. So we're in the process of building up from where we're at right now. We actually have, this is other calving area set up, and we have, it's nice and warm today, but in Michigan in the winter it can get pretty cold. So this is what we call a hot box. We can put a calf in there. It has a heater that blows warm air onto the calf. If a calf gets chilled and its body temperature goes down, we can warm them up pretty quickly in that. I guess the scale's not out here, but we typically we will process calves right after they're born, usually within that first 24 hours, and we'll take a birth weight. We'll give injections of two different minerals and vitamins. We give selenium, and we also give a shot of vitamin A, D, and E shortly after they're born. And we also, we dip their navel with iodine to make sure that dries up and isn't a route of infection. And we also give an identifying ear tag. And that ear tag has their own identification, but also has the dam's number on it, so that if they get separated, we can get them paired back up without going to all the records. It's right in their ear. If we were to bring cows or calves in to do something with them, to what we call work them or process them, give them vaccinations or deworming or measurements at weaning or yearling age, we bring them into this facility. It has a squeeze gate here. So come back this way. bring them into here, into this round tub, be able to squeeze them, so they have to go up the alleyway into the inside handling facility. Okay? But this is where the cattle would come in, and they can come in this handling facility. They can come in double wide, too wide, and then they have to make a decision. Whoever goes first. I don't do this every day, so I gotta remember which is which. Come into the chute. We catch them around the neck, right here. We can squeeze the sides, keep them calm. And we have an RFID reader, so it reads the radio frequency identification tag that's in their ear. That is brought up on the scale. You can see that it registers the weight. I got my heavy shoes on today. Yeah. But it reads the EID, puts that in here, and so then we can just hit the record button and it stores the weight or any other codes that we give it, condition codes. If we want to give a body condition score or some other type of a hip height or something like that, some kind of measurement, we want to put that in, we can put that in here, and it associates all that with the RFID, so that we've got that right on the scale head. So the next time they come through, it can calculate what their average daily gain was and that kind of thing, and give it to us immediately, because that scans the animal and knows who it is and associates it with that history of the animal. That's my handiwork. Mostly, of course, we have it out here because we have a lot of students, and so we talk to them about beef quality assurance, which is making sure that we're doing everything in a way that's going to produce a wholesome product. And so we talk a lot about making sure that the injections are in the neck and that kind of thing. And so with students, we come out here and process cattle and practice the right way to give a intermuscular injection or a subcutaneous injection to cattle in the neck, what size needles to use and when to change the needles and all those kind of things. We conduct estrus synchronization in the spring. And do what's called fixed time AI. So we artificially inseminate everything at one time to AI sires that we select, and then shortly after that we put bulls in for natural breeding for about a 50-day breeding season in total. And those calves then are born about the last week in January, first week in February. And our main market is to sell bulls to commercial cow-calf producers, mostly in Michigan, but some across the U.S. as well. There was a bull that was born in this herd called MSU. Call him MSU Dark Knight, that sold a lot of semen in Brazil because his fertility was really good. So they put him on a lot of Nelore cows. So I think he sold 800,000 to 1 million units of semen, something like that, while he was alive. So these cows will spend, again, all but like a week of the year out here on pasture or grazing corn stover. And so they're actually sometime next week, I think they're going to be moved to the corn stover, and they'll be there until about the first part of calving, and then we feed them some supplemental hay while they're out there on corn stover and when they start to calve.
They stay here in pasture for how long?
So they'll be on pasture from shortly after they have their calves in February we don't really have much green grass for them to eat until the 1st of May. But then they'll be on pasture from May through October, November usually. And then at that point they go to corn stover for usually 60, maybe 90 days. And toward the end of that 60 or 90 days, we may supplement some with other forages like mostly hay, sometimes corn silage, and then the cycle kind of repeats itself. So they're usually out on pasture or corn stover of some kind. So this is our feedlot facility. It's the type of facility that we have is very similar to what commercial facilities are, except for we've got lots of small pens so that we can do replicated research. But other than that, it's similar to facilities that would be in Michigan or the upper Midwest, that it's completely covered so that we're controlling all the manure. There's no runoff to any outside sources. We've got 16 pens on this side. This is kind of mirrored on the other end of the building. We've got that many on the other end of the building too. This research trial that we have here is not yet started, but we've got Holstein steer calves, and then we're comparing those to a beef Holstein cross, because beef Holstein cross has become very popular throughout the U.S., but particularly in Michigan. We were a very high dairy state, and so about 80% of the beef in Michigan that we feed out in Michigan is Holstein steers, and a big portion of that now are the crossbred beef Holstein cross. Probably close to a third of those steers just in the last 6 years have become beef Holstein cross. And so we're comparing feed efficiencies, average daily gains, feed intakes, all the carcass traits, and overall economic value. This particular study is going to be looking at the crossbreds genetic piece of it and see if we can increase ribeye size and make those crossbreds a little more like beef, a little less like Holsteins, because Holsteins have a very flat muscle shape, and we want to try to increase that lean meat yield from a carcass.
And what is the nutrition, the feed?
The feed is similar to what a lot of feedlots would feed in Michigan, which is primarily based on corn silage. We feed a lot of high moisture shelled corn, so a fermented product, as well as dried distillers grains for additional protein, and then we usually have a supplement mix that contains an ionophore with it as well. So it's really pretty much all corn based. It's corn silage, high moisture corn, and the distillers grains comes from corn as well. There's not much steam flaking kind of east of the Mississippi River. Smaller units, and we kind of have we try to take the same advantage of getting starch out of the corn by fermenting it and doing a high moisture fermentation with the corn rather than steam flaking like they do in the West.
They put the feed only once a day, or?
Yes. So, yeah, good question. So they'll feed usually in the morning at about 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning. They'll look at everybody very carefully for any kind of signs of sickness or anything like that before they feed, because they'll look at bunks and what we call the bunks, decide how much they're going to feed for the day, if they're going to increase it or decrease it from the previous day, and then they'll feed and also look for any kind of signs of sickness. And then once they're done feeding, anything that looks like it may be off a little bit, not feeling well, they'll get it into the handling facility, take a temperature, and decide if there's some diagnosis they want to follow through with some kind of treatment on. So these would be the crossbreds. So in Michigan, most of the calves would leave the dairy at about a day or 2 days of age, and then they would go to a calf raiser. It so happens that a lot of our calf raisers are Amish, so they do a lot of things without electricity, very much very manual kinds of systems to raise the calves, but they're very, very attentive to health issues and that sort of thing. And so they'll raise the calf from that 2 or 3 day old calf up until it weighs probably 400 pounds or so before it goes into a feedlot. So these calves have just been here for about a month, and we're getting ready to run that research trial.
Is there some difference in the price of crossbreeding and only Angus?
That's a good question. There's definitely a difference in price for the crossbreds compared to the Holsteins. The crossbreds have been bringing a lot higher price, close to $700 or $800 per calf, which is probably more than they're actually worth through the system. So that's one of the things we're kind of looking at, is where should that price be to be equivalent, on a Holstein basis or on a beef basis. Where should it actually fall out? Because a lot of people are kind of guessing at what the final carcass value might be. It was almost zero in 2016, and now it's a third of the supply chain on the dairy side. It's there. Almost everyone is breeding at least a third of their cows to beef on dairy.
When you say the calf is 100 pounds, calf the weight, or
when it's born.
Yeah. When they sell for $700.
Yeah, it's quite expensive for that calf. Yeah, I think it's too expensive, and everybody knows it. But I don't know. The dairies are certainly taking advantage of it, while the market is trying to adjust to figure out what the true value is. Since these calves haven't been here very long, we would start them with a fair amount of hay in the diet, high forage diet, so to get their rumens acclimated before we will eventually decrease the amount of hay and increase the amount of high moisture corn in the diet. So our final diet would be about 80% concentrate, or in this case high moisture corn, and 15 to 20% a high forage such as hay or corn silage. Certified Angus beef has been a very successful beef brand in this country. It started back in 1978, and it's a portion of the Angus Association. It's a subsidiary of the American Angus Association. The purpose of that was to sell more Angus bulls. And so part of what the requirements are on a live animal is to have no white above the flank, no white behind the shoulders. They just changed the specifications about a year ago, so I'm a little rusty. It used to be 51% black, but they've become more restrictive in how much black. And that's indicative of the Angus breed, right, to be mostly black. There's also carcass specifications, though, so they have to reach mid-choice and higher, which is a lot of marbling to qualify for certified Angus beef. And then it has to be harvested at a processor that's also certified to be able to sell that beef as well. But it's a very, very popular brand in the United States. So if they are black, at least visually they qualify, but then they have to also qualify with the carcass specifications too. These are steers that are on a research project where we're comparing the crossbreds to the Holstein steers, the beef Holstein cross to the Holstein steers, and the crossbreds in this trial have already gone to harvest, and these Holstein steers are scheduled for a week from now to go to harvest. So they're getting very close. They're probably weighing about 15 to 1,550 pounds, something like that on average. And the main objective of this research project was to look at levels of corn silage in the diet. So we've got 2 different levels. Some of these Holstein steers are getting 20% corn silage and the others 40% corn silage, with the objective of looking at liver abscesses, because both Holsteins and the crossbreds tend to have a fairly high level of liver abscesses. We wanted to see if feeding more forage would decrease the level of liver abscesses. So we're right in the midst of that trial. It looks like lots of corn silage, but the corn silage is really high in moisture, and so on a dry matter basis, I'm not sure which diet this is. This is probably the 40% corn silage diet. So the rest would be high moisture corn, distiller's grains, and then a little bit of a supplement. Yeah. The harvestors, we don't use them much anymore, so they're actually they're set for demolition. We've typically in the past have kept either corn silage or high moisture corn in those, but they're so what do I want to say? They're so mechanically intensive that they break down a lot, and so they've kind of gotten to the end of their useful life. So I can show you the silos that we just put in to help replace those. This is a different facility type that's really popular in the upper Midwest. It's called a slatted floor barn. It's of course has slats for floors, and then there's a 12-foot deep manure pit underneath the cattle. So we don't have to use any bedding. The manure just goes down with hoof action, and because of that, we have to keep the animals fairly populated in the pens to be able to get that manure to go down through the cracks. Then it's pumped out as a liquid manure once or twice a year. It has lower labor requirements to be able to do that, but the facility comes at a higher cost. There's lots of facilities like this in Michigan. Again, there wouldn't be as many small pens. There would be big pens that may have 100 to 200 cattle in a pen, but we've got it set up for research purposes with really small pens.
And the diets here is the same that the other?
Diets would be similar, the same kind of finishing diets. These cattle here are some of the calves from our Angus herd that did not have the genetics to be able to make bulls or heifers that wanted to be retained or sold to other people. So the ones that didn't make that get put in the feedlot, and then these cattle in particular actually are harvested and go to the Michigan State University food venues on campus for meals for students on campus. These ag bags are used to contain feed that would be fermented, so we could put high moisture corn or corn silage or haylage in these and exclude oxygen so the fermentation can proceed. They work quite well for us in a research setting because we can have different small batches of different feedstuffs, but they're a little bit more management to make sure that they stay fresh. And here we have we've got one large bunker that holds high moisture corn, shelled corn, and then 4 smaller bunkers that hold usually are set aside for corn silage. And we just built this year three other bunkers that can have, of course, anything in them, but we've split it up between high moisture corn and corn silage as well. We also have some bunks at times with haylage, because we also feed some of the sheep unit from this particular unit. These are what's going to replace having some of the feed in the big upright silos.
Do you use Penn State box or not?
Yeah, we do with the students on a practical basis. We don't often too much, but we do, to see if we've got the right chop length on the corn silage and that kind of thing. Make sure we have enough effective fiber in the diets. So this is our handling facility for the feedlot operation. It's set up in a curve going into a silencer chute. We use this a lot on the research side, because almost everything on a research trial, regardless of what it is, gets weighed on an every 28-day basis. But a lot of the research that we do out here requires more intensive handling of the cattle for different sampling or measurements that are taken throughout. And so cattle are coming through here on a pretty regular basis.